Vice Chair Silva.
I couldn't hear you.
Vice Chair Silva.
Present.
Commissioner Silva.
Present.
Let's see, we have Commissioner Ken Cooley.
Here.
Representative Diane Gould for Commissioner Ida Claire.
Here.
Commissioner Deborah Garnes.
Here.
Commissioner Allegra de la Cruz.
Here.
Representative Lori Nazarian for Commissioner Mark Garaducci.
Here.
Commissioner June Kim Lopez.
Here.
Commissioner David Rabbit.
Here.
And we have Commissioner Fawad Swayze. Okay. Commissioner Andy Tran.
Here.
Commissioner Vincent Wells. Okay, the roll call's been, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules at this time of year to participate in this short meeting. The first item on the agenda is the presentation of the Executive Director Recruitment and Selection Process, and this will be presented by Lisa Mangat, who's the Chief Deputy Director of Policy and Administration for Cal OES. Lisa, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you very much for making the time to have this meeting and have this important discussion. Perhaps before I kick it off to the team, let me introduce, and then I want to kind of frame up kind of the goals of today and kind of provide some context for why we're having this exercise. So on my left is Chief Counsel of Cal OES Headquarters for the agency, and Alex Powell. On my right, we've got the Chief of Policy, Sarah Poss, for headquarters for the agency. And then also I've got our Chief Guru of all things human resources for the agency, Jeannie Clade. I said that right, Jeannie?
Claddy.
Clade.
Very close.
I've already made a mistake in the first
okay.
1 minute introductions. So let me kind of provide some context for you. This commission has been really kind of blessed to have stability at the executive director level for decades. It's a highly unusual thing in state government. So as you know, Dick has served as the executive director for decades. He may actually win in state government the longest standing executive director for a commission, I'm guessing. It would be interesting to look into that. But during this time, it seemed like the right time for us to really kind of memorialize for the commission the hiring process and also what a duty statement would look like for this individual. Okay, so let me talk to you about kind of how we approach this. The Department of Consumer Affairs in state government has the most boards and commissions under them in the state of California at the state level. So we look to them to look for kind of best practices and how they hire their executive directors and what their process is, particularly making sure that there's transparency in the process, that since it's a state civil service position, that it adheres to all of the state civil service requirements, but then also leave some space for the commission to have some transparency in this process. So the process that we're presenting to you today is modeled after that process and then tailored a bit for the specific needs of this commission. Okay. Also in state government, if you're in the private sector, this may feel like a very foreign process. But for us in state government, and I see Commissioner Tran nodding his head, for us in state government or local government, city government, you know, these are public servants. We're using public resources, and the individual that we hire, just like all of us in this room, are servants to the people of California. And given that this is public funding, it's very important that there be a merit-based system. So the process that we walk through with you today has been designed well before we got together on this, but it's a system in state government that's designed with the intention to support this merit-based system, equity, the importance of fairness, and that it's a fair, competitive process. So that's the spirit with which kind of the state government duty statements are in place. A duty statement, each one of us, actually in this room, every state employee has a duty statement that's assigned to their position. It's one of those perfunctory things that's required to hire a position. For this executive director position, there has been a duty statement. It has not been refreshed for a very, very long time since we have not gone out for a recruitment in decades for this position. So what we did is we took the current executive director duty statement and we refined it a bit to be a little more contemporary today and to also reflect that the Seismic Safety Commission is now also nested and part of the Cal OES agency within state government. Before I kick it over to the team, I want to give deep gratitude to the two commissioners. If you recall at the last meeting, as kind of an approach to make sure that we work with you and your designees before we present to the full commission. Commissioner Tran and Commissioner Silva were really generous with their time, very short notice, looked through these documents with us, and then we walked through them, and then they were able to provide feedback. Both the hiring process document that you have before you today and the duty statement that's being presented to you today, both of those reflect their edits and the discussions with those two commissioners. So each of you send out deep gratitude for them for making kind of the first cut before we bring this to you. Now, as we walk through this, we're going to do it in a way that's very transparent. I'm going to ask our chief of HR to methodically read through all of the sentences of the hiring practice, okay? The next document is going to be the duty statement, which for reasons that will be quickly apparent to you, I think we're only going to hit the highlights of that document since it's a little more perfunctory. But I also want to share with you, if you don't have a strong reaction to anything, if you don't have any changes or edits, that's perfectly fine. Frankly, we're not really expecting you to have that. But I think that, especially since we're establishing this process formally for this commission for the first time, that it's important to have some sunshine in this process before you make a decision on that. So before I hand this off, are there any questions perhaps kind of on the process side of things? All right. So with that, I will hand this off to our Chief of Human Resources for the Cal OES agency, Jeannie.
Good morning, everybody.
Jeannie, before you start, can you remind folks? So folks, you have had this document. So the documents that are being presented are the same ones that you've already had the opportunity to review, but I'm not gonna, I know that we have members of the public online, and I also don't want to assume that you've actually been able to take time out of your busy schedules. Can you just remind folks how many pages this is before you start?
Yeah, this particular document, including the cover page, is 4 pages. So the first page is just the cover page, indicates it's the Seismic Safety Commission Executive Director hiring process, and it's dated October 26, 2021, and does indicate that it's a draft document.
And then one more, sorry to interrupt you yet again. One more thing that I think might be helpful is on your screen, you should see the actual document itself. We're going to go through it. If you have any changes, we are set up to make real-time edits. If the group as a whole thinks that that's important, we can kind of try to do that. I think the goal is at the end of this meeting to have something that this group is comfortable with and that we can move forward with the recruitment. Thank you, Jeannie.
Okay, perfect. I'll go ahead and start. The introduction and purpose. The purpose of this document is to provide a practical guide for the recruitment of a qualified executive director for the Seismic Safety Commission within the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, Cal OES. The Cal OES Human Resources Classification and Pay, CMP, analyst assigned to support the offices of the director will be able to assist the commission members through the process of selecting an executive director. Review duty statement. An updated and current executive director duty statement that clearly and accurately describes the functions and responsibilities of the position as determined by the commission is required. The duty statement provides the foundation upon which the recruitment is based. Any changes to the duty statement require commission review and approval at a publicly announced commission meeting. The duty statement will be used to develop recruitment flyers or advertisements for the position. In addition, it will be used to define the criteria for the screening of applications and the development of interview questions. Recruitment of qualified candidates. Recruitment and appointments of the executive director shall be made in accordance with the provisions of civil service laws to ensure consistency and transparency. Commission members may inform the qualifications that will produce the best executive director. In coordination with the Cal OES Office of the Director, the Commission or the Selection Committee may develop a set of qualifications to be used in the recruitment of the Executive Director. The Selection Committee used to assist in the recruitment effort should be limited to no more than 2 members to ensure their meetings are not considered a public meeting. The Commission should identify 2 members who will have sufficient time and interest to commit to actively participating in the selection process. The following is a list of general criteria that may be used.
May I ask a general question of just, I know we have the council there. Speak a little bit about that 2-member requirement and avoidance of a quorum in as much as the commissioner has so many members. And this is Assembly Member Ken Cooley asking the question.
Sure. Thanks, Assembly Member Cooley. Yeah. So when the chairperson took action to have commissioners assist in the recruitment, essentially that those members are serving in an advisory capacity to work with Cal OES, assess the recruitment package, and then provide input to the board. And the law requires that if a subcommittee, even if it's advisory nature, consists of 3 or more members, irrespective of the size of the overarching body, 3 or more members would constitute a formal subcommittee, and therefore would be subject to the rules of Bagley-Keene. And so by assigning 2, it allows more flexibility. It allows the commission to participate in that underlying process without requiring that each time that they get together to review, requiring notice to the public and access to those discussions. And so often you'll see on commissions, you'll have a few of the members that wouldn't necessarily constitute a formal subcommittee.
But of course, since we're supporting transparency, if we had a larger subcommittee, we had to notice, this is a different type of commission in the sense that all the former executive directors, Richard Andrews, Tom Tobin, Richard, very, very substantive folks in the seismic field, very well grounded in this multidisciplinary role, which involves very senior level interactions with other units of government, certainly within state government, federal agencies. I think identifying the person who has that sort of gravitas in the seismic field is actually very much at the heart of this recruitment. And, it's a very substantive process. I've read carefully the document. I find it interesting that we don't actually set out the provisions of the law that govern what the officer is supposed to afford guidance with. 8589.75, 8589.76. These are very senior level substantive provisions of law that there is a breadth to this particular executive director position that is quite different than a standard agency or commission in DCA. So I actually am not worried about breaching the 2-person rule because I think the hiring is so deeply affected with the public interest.
Yeah, understood. I think, from a practical standpoint, given the size of the commission, to have every member participate in that underlying housekeeping side would maybe, I can't speak to how long it would delay, but it could certainly complicate the process. And the idea here is obviously we want input from the commission to ensure that the pool of candidates is properly screened, but ultimately the whole body will have an opportunity to meet the candidates that are selected through this process. So it's not that those two individuals will serve as the sole members that will be participating in the selection. It's really the housekeeping side to work closely with Callaway's human resources to sift through the applications that may come through.
Right, and I'm more looking at it from the standpoint of I've known and worked with in my career all three executive directors, so I sort of have a sense of what sort of person can bring the sort of stature to the role that this commission needs, as it is both multidisciplinary but really trying to elevate a life safety conversation for all Californians. It's a very unique role in state government and always has been.
Assemblymember Cooley, this is Chief Deputy Monget, and perhaps I think I would respond from a perspective of we share your goal. We had various ways we could have gone about this. I think our first blush reaction was that we were just going to go ahead and draft a duty statement and show it to you and move on. But we also recognize the heft of this position. Particularly, you name several of the prior executive directors and the important role that they play, but particularly since we have not done this for quite some time for this body. So we know that this is an important step for this, and that memorializing this process is going to, likely outlive all of us in our participation in this space. So I think to your points, I think it's going to be very important how we do the recruitment, where we recruit, how we recruit. And what we've talked about here is to not do the standard recruitment where you post it within, the normal CalHR process, but that we also use our comms folks and get the word out that about this position, right? You will find, I think all of you will find when we finally get to the duty statement, duty statements are not exciting. And so I think if any one of us read our duty statements here, we would wonder why we ever took the position, right? How we talk about the position, how we talk about the important role that it plays, how we talk about its role in the future, how we talk about our expectations. And I would agree with you, Assembly Member, that not every position is grounded in California law in the manner that this is. So I think when we're doing the recruitment and then also when we do the hiring process and ask the questions and we talk about expectations and what this role is, that's absolutely has to be contextually how we start in terms of when we talk about competitive candidates. We always hope for a very robust competitive candidate pool. If I had a magic wand, we have so many competitive candidates that we have a tough time making a decision, right? The body, when we go through the hiring process and the interview panel, we will include, I don't know, a specific number of commissioners, but remember, we are going to bring this person back to the full body, and we can talk about it at that time about what that looks like. So there will be an opportunity for each of you to weigh in terms of the selected candidate and whether this is someone that you think that can adequately represent the commission in all of the roles and meeting the expectations. So I think I'm not hearing that we're that far off our goals and what we're trying to achieve through this process.
And I don't necessarily disagree, Lisa. I think I would say in my experience, and I first touched the issue of earthquake, believe it or not, back in '76, and was in the middle of the legislature's response to Loma Prieta and even the CREF program under Wilson and the CEA. I definitely think we need to put the statutory provisions governing this role very prominent, because that's actually the sort of thing that someone with a track record in this field will look at what the law says they ought to be working on. And they will be able to form an opinion, is this something that they would bring vigor and excitement and see a career potential that they'd like to pursue. I think in this field, the statutory statements of the scope of the commission's responsibility will animate excellent candidates. And I think that's what you want. You want someone to bring their energy, vision, their sense of possibility on behalf of the whole state. And these statutory provisions have always played that role since they got started under Al Alquist back in the day.
Assemblymember, what I might offer, if the full body's comfortable with this, is that maybe we take a crack at adding that into this document that Chief Clade is going through right now. So Alex is going to be looking at the statute right now, so he's doing a little real-time staff work. And then he'll be working with Sarah here as Jeannie proceeds. And maybe there's a way to kind of highlight that and add a section to this hiring process with a header that really kind of pulls it out and provides some context.
Sounds
Are
good.
you comfortable with that? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Assemblymember. All right, Jeannie.
Okay, I'll go ahead and pick up at the bottom before the bullets of page 2. The following is a list of general criteria that may be used. Demonstrated supervisory and management skills, administrative experience, including fiscal responsibility, budget preparation, development of regulations, policy development and implementation, a working knowledge of the state and federal statutes and rules pertaining to the commission, ability to communicate effectively both orally and in writing, and deal effectively with a broad spectrum of people interacting with the commission. The initial recruitment will include advertising on the California Careers website, which is stated here, www.calcareers.ca.gov. Other recruitment activities can include posting on the Cal OES LinkedIn account and advertising in professional publications, depending on the available budget and the needs of the commission.
Has the commission ever adopted regulations, Dick? I see that boilerplate language there. I kind of,
Yes, we have.
okay, thanks.
Okay, screening applications. The selection committee will work with the assigned Cal OES CMP analyst and the Cal OES Chief Deputy Director, Policy and Administration to advertise, develop screening criteria, review applications, conduct initial interviews, and obtain a manageable number of candidates to be interviewed. Initial screening of applicants is general in nature and intended to eliminate those applicants who clearly do not meet the criteria established by the commission or selection committee. Applicants screened out during this process should be notified by mail of the results. Per Government Code Section 12946, Cal OES will retain the applications a minimum of 2 years following the completion of the selection process. A final screening of applicants by the selection committee will identify a target number of candidates for an initial interview. Initial interviews. If initial interviews are needed to narrow the field of candidates, Cal OES, in coordination with the selection committee, is responsible for conducting the interviews. In scheduling interviews, the notification should provide at least a 1-week advance notice for the candidates. Candidates should be advised to bring a list of at least 3 professional references to the initial interview. During the initial interview, the following topics should be thoroughly covered: the exact duties of the position, including travel requirements, the supervision given and/or received, the frequency and level of public contact, the value of independent decision-making, the responsibility of training staff if applicable, the executive director's relationship with the commission, the education desired or required, the qualifications of the position. In closing the interview, advise the applicants when a decision is expected to be made and that all candidates will be notified in writing if they will proceed to the next step, a final interview before the full commission. Checking references. The references for the final candidate or candidates should be obtained and contacted prior to any final interviews. This provides the commission with all necessary information to make a decision on the day of the final interviews and eliminates the need for another public meeting on the same issue. Discussion of final candidates. Cal OES, in coordination with the selection committee, will present the final candidate or candidates to the full commission in closed session. This meeting must conform to the notice requirements of the Bagley-Keene Act for all commission meetings. Selection of finalists. Upon completion of the discussion of the final candidate or candidates, the commission votes to select the final candidate for the executive director position. This vote is also held in closed session. Candidates notification. After the commission has determined the candidate, the commission chair will contact the selected candidate and offer the position. Once the candidate accepts, the effective date for the candidate to assume the duties of the executive director must be determined. The commission chair will provide the candidate with a confirmation letter drafted by Cal OES CMP analyst, which outlines the facts of the appointment and an attachment which outlines the state's benefits package. Formal announcement. After the final candidate has been provided and accepts the role, the commission chair shall return to open session to generally announce that the commission has made a selection. Oath of office. The oath of office must be administered on or prior to the effective date of the executive director's appointment. The oath of office may be administered by any board member or the Cal OES director or chief deputy directors.
Thank you, Jeannie. So I think we'll pause there and see if there's any questions or comments. Okay. Let me look at the team and the room. What I might suggest is that we move forward on duty statement while you folks continue. So the team here is going to continue to try to think through kind of that edit to this document. So as they continue to do some real-time staff work, I think we will move on to the duty statement. So rather than reading line by line, what we're going to do is kind of really highlight kind of the more substantive aspects of the duty statement. And with that, please proceed, Jeannie.
Yeah, so the page 1 is very general information. It talks about the supervision that's going to be received, exercised, physical demands, contacts, just very general, fairly basic information there. Really, the nuts and bolts of a duty statement is the essential functions, which begin on page 2. And we have percentages of time, estimated percentages of time that they'll perform these essential functions. So 40% of their time, they should be performing the full range of required and essential functions of administering and managing the commission. Manage and coordinate the day-to-day work of the commission, including the work of technical consultants and technical staff. Act as the primary representative for the commission to all levels of state, federal, and local and the private sector, including navigating complex stakeholder relationships. Represent the commission to the legislature. They may be called upon to testify before legislative committees. Coordinate with Cal OES procurement to negotiate and execute necessary contracts and interagency agreements consistent with the state's contracting and procurement laws and policies related to the procurement of both information technology and non-information technology goods and services. Recommend to the commission policies and procedures under which the office of the commission will operate and interprets and implements the policies of the commission. Appoint and supervise in accordance with civil service and other provisions of law, commission staff as may be necessary to carry out the purposes and intent of the Seismic Safety Act. Identify, manage, and coordinate staff training and performance enhancement as necessary. Coordinate briefings for the commission chairperson and appointed commissioners relative to seismic safety, sensitive matters and/or other matters as determined to be necessary or as directed by the commission chair. Monitor, develop, and review proposed legislation in coordination with Cal OES. Manage the commission's budget. Manage the commission's human resource activities to ensure compliance with the state's civil service laws and rules relating to the state's hiring practice, equal opportunity employment. Perform other duties as required by the commission and state statutes. 30% of the time, makes public and processes of the commission and implements the policies of the commission in carrying out the intent of the Seismic Safety Act. Advise on a comprehensive program for earthquake mitigation and preparedness. Administer agreements with private, nonprofit, scientific, educational, and professional associations in promoting seismic safety. Manage the California Research and Development Fund. Develop procedures to implement the intent and processes of Seismic Safety Act. Coordinate state agencies, public and private sector to devise criteria to promote earthquake and disaster risk reduction. Produce research publications and education material for the public, state agencies, and the legislature that support earthquake recovery and reconstruction. Manage commission-appointed advisory committees. Coordinate support staff for the commission meetings and any necessary subcommittee meetings. Provide technical and administrative direction. Serves as the primary commission resource for the expeditious response to or resolution of complex or sensitive Seismic Safety Act issues. And the last section of the essential functions is 25% of the time, which is coordinate with Cal OES to enhance the research capabilities and products of the Seismic Safety Commission and identify future efficiencies. Collaborates with all hazardous programs within Cal OES to ensure recent research information and study results are included in the development or enhancements to various seismic systems and initiatives, including but not limited to the earthquake early warning system and earthquake preparedness plans. The rest of the duty statement goes on to talk about a few marginal functions. It does talk about the desirable qualifications. This one I would consider a highlight, so I'll go ahead and go through these. A broad-based knowledge of earthquake and seismic processes, engineering, architecture, mitigation, policy development, legislation, etc. Experience communicating with local, state, and federal government officials, including the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Experience navigating and making recommendations on projects that contain multiple disciplines. Experience with public speaking, addressing the news media, and testifying before various government entities. Willing to travel, especially after a disaster. Completion of a 4-year degree in any field. Pages 4 through the end kind of talk about the requirements, mostly physical requirements. I won't go through those. And then, of course, at the end, it's the certification. The signatures are necessary by the employee and their supervisor to ensure that they understand.
Thank you, Jeannie. So I think at this point we'll pause for any questions or comments.
I actually overall think it is a good thing. I think this Assemblyman Cooley again, because of the responsibility that attaches to the role in affecting public policy, setting up funding for various types of studies, those sorts of things. I think that strongly supports a good process that people feel is well documented and understood, and sort of the vetting of independence, et cetera. So I do concur that a more formal approach is good in the modern fishbowl of government in which we all labor.
Thank you, Assemblyman. So with that, so it sounds like that there's no further comments or questions with regard to the duty statement. Oh.
This is Commissioner de la Cruz. I actually had a couple of questions and or comments around equity goals. So I know we've seen the word kind of sprinkled throughout the job description, but I wondered if we could be more specific about what that actually looks like in terms of operationalizing some of these goals. So is it, are we adding more around ensuring that staff is reflective of the communities that they serve, that we're coordinating with Cal OES's important work on equity? I know the agency has played a leadership role in really ensuring that our disaster response is geared towards serving all Californians, especially those who experience heightened vulnerability during disaster because of their disconnection or their kind of earlier, trauma and or harm at the hands of government. So just wanted to see, where you think there are additional opportunities in that job description to be more specific and a little clearer around what it actually looks like to lead on equity issues in this capacity.
As we went through that, did you have any specific areas that kind of leapt out to you?
Yeah, I do. I think when we're thinking about, staff management and or recruitment, there's opportunity there. And I think there actually are some additions that I'd love to suggest. So I wanted to also just ask a question about what is the process that you'd like to receive comments and or edits?
I think we're open to doing it right now in real time.
Okay, great. So maybe pull back up the application there.
This is Vice Chair Silva. Lisa, would you mind, or your HR representative there, affirming for me or explaining how consistent this is with state level human resource equity issues, et cetera?
Maybe I'll take a what might be helpful is let me back up just one step. In terms of equity, I think the commissioner had made some references to kind of the CalOES agencies focus on equity. Last year, we went to the legislature with a proposal seeking the support to create a new Office of Equity embedded here. And it would actually be a high-level office, part of the director's office, with a team of folks. It also took a very successful Listos grant program, and this was funding that was pushed out to various community-based organizations to support equity and getting messaging out about the importance of emergency preparedness. That was one-time funding, so the legislature granted the authority to OES to create a new office, to appoint a new governor appointee who would be the chief over this Office of Equity, and then also there would be some ongoing grants. So there's $25 million that will be an ongoing grant structure. So I believe we discussed that with the commissioner, which is really exciting. I think that that the more contemporary view of emergency response today, I think that there's heightened awareness about the importance of how to make deeper relationships and connections with those communities that we're striving to serve. So that's kind of the context, I believe, Commissioner, that your comments were made. And I believe so I think your point's well taken in terms of that. I think that there might be places in here that maybe we could make some comments. So for example, I'm just real timing this here so you folks can veto me. But, maybe in desirable class of qualifications, you can highlight that, a person that has demonstrated or has worked in efforts that advance, something like that. Maybe Commissioner, you have some language for us. So I think Commissioner Silva, I think this duty statement is certainly kind of within the realm of kind of a standard duty statement, but I do think that there is some space for you folks to add some things here in the space of equity. There's always a challenge in duty statements. The more specific you get, it can kind of tie your hands as a body when we do the hiring. But there might be some ways to kind of put in some broad strokes in here and kind of establish it as a principle for you. So hopefully that answers your question, Commissioner Silva.
I really do appreciate that question from Commissioner Silva, because I feel like if we're aligning with CalOES efforts and specific language that they've included in some of their critical documents, then we're really drawing that, that continuity throughout this search effort as well, and making clear what those qualifications are. So is there any way to do a search now, or would that be something that would happen later in terms of connecting back to CalOES's dedication of resources and attention to issues of equity?
Commissioner Dela Cruz, if I might, we're prepared to do this in real time with you so that we don't need to, reschedule another meeting. So I think we're prepared for that. So if you have specific edits that you would like to share, then I think we can discuss it as a group if you folks are comfortable with that approach.
I'm fine doing that. I just also want to make sure that we know that we don't necessarily have to recreate the wheel if we're building on Callaway-S's leadership. And so just making sure that we're connecting and we're consistent with language that they've already used to describe whether it's qualifications or duty statement, bullet points. I just want to make sure we have the benefit of some of the larger agency thinking around these issues.
I actually think for the purposes of this duty statement, I think we have some flexibility, especially if we're fairly broad. I don't think we need to be super specific or even reference the Office of Equity. I think if we can kind of establish in here kind of expectations that that the work that consideration will be given regarding the principles of equity in the state of California, and I think here we can probably craft some sentences to kind of put some stakes in the ground. And then perhaps as you're doing your interview and as we're thinking about the questions that you want to ask of the actual candidates, then that's a place that we can delve a little deeper. That's what I might offer with regard to the duty statement.
If I could jump in just to kind of follow up on how you might do this. And it's taking note of the law that was passed concerning equity, and specifically in OAS. Under the essential functions, the 40% category, performing the full range of required essential functions of administering and managing the commission. The second bullet is act as the primary representative of the commission to all levels of state, federal, local government, and the private sector, including navigating complex stakeholder relationships. We might well put in there something about the expectation would be that would serve primary representative to community-based organizations or community-based organizations reflecting the diversity of California, because that starts to introduce, if this person is the primary representative, would they be well suited to that sort of broadened coverage? I actually think that's sort of putting a stake in the ground in that essential function is certainly consistent with the law, but it does sort of surface that type of value, and in general is sort of consistent with the evolution of California law on so many fronts to make sure that communities which have hitherto been not in the forefront of decision are not bypassed. We could do sort of the similar thing in the next category, which is the 30% category, where we talk about coordinate state agencies, public and private sector to devise criteria to promote earthquake and disaster risk reduction, affecting all Californians or all California communities. I mean, you could sort of develop a little bit on what that scope is. So it's sort of create an expectancy that you have a more granular program that touches some of the diversity of our state. And if you want to put diversity in there, that would actually be consistent. And again, I think there's room in the statute for that sort of interest.
This is Lori Najura. I agree with the assembly member, and I was looking at those two bullets as well. And a lot of times when we couple public and private sector, it tends to denote more the business sectors or formalized private sector organizations, and there are places in statute, and I believe I've seen them in other duty statements where it kind of breaks that out to include non-governmental organizations and community-based and other community-based organizations, such as Assemblymember referenced. So we could potentially expand that coordination, not only state agencies, public and private sector, non-governmental organizations, and other community-based organizations, reflecting the diversity of our state, to promote earthquake and disaster risk reduction. I think that language would be consistent with other documents that I've seen in public service.
Yeah, and I will add to that, Lori, that's a great comment. I think you can also introduce the element of at risk, because we often see, them that have gets, them that do not have get neglected. In a lot of areas of disaster response, that's a global thing. So I definitely think an acknowledgement of communities, including, at risk of having adequate resources to respond, or some other, another pathway to getting to the sensitivity that's been raised, which I think is, a point well made.
So I dropped a few suggestions into the chat with regards to language that might fit here. And I want to highlight a distinction between diversity and actual acknowledgement of institutional marginalization and underrepresentation and underservice that has been experienced by communities of color, people who are poor, people who are immigrant, people who don't speak dominant languages in California. And that's an important distinction, I think, because we're not just talking about difference, but we're talking about difference that has been has resulted in actual marginalization. And so that's an important distinction here. And instead of just saying kind of want to work with all people, we should say, like, we want to make sure that there's a focus on bringing people into the center and on focusing and designing to those communities that have experienced institutional marginalization, or that generational underrepresentation. So those are phrases and terminologies and ideas that are really starting to bubble up in equity work, is that recognition of historical and generational, the results of disinvestment, the results of marginalization.
Well, I think including people or communities at risk of marginalization, that's still pretty high level and consistent with this sort of approach, but it sort of puts a stake in the ground, as I think you said a moment ago. It's kind of a marker that establishes a public value, and certainly it's one very consistent with Governor Newsom. I'm working with the governor on this annex project, and representing all Californians is a very high priority of the governor's office, as I know.
Commissioners, so we've been listening to this conversation. Sarah here is in real time trying to provide some suggestions, both from kind of our internal conversation here, and then were you able to get Commissioner De La Cruz's?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Commissioner De La Cruz, this, which highlighted right here, is your first comment from the chat, and I just kind of took a chance to put it in the desirable qualifications. But if you think, you and the commissioners think that it should go in a different place, please advise, and I can make any edits that you see fit.
Yeah, I actually think that would be required, but not just desirable, given the agency's leadership.
I would actually, I would concur with you, especially since it's especially the way the language is crafted. So she's going to move that up, if the group is comfortable with that, into this essential function section.
I think that's a good idea.
Should we engage in stability too?
So this is Commissioner Silva. Unfortunately, the way it's phrased, when you move it from the desirable qualifications to the essential functions, that is not a function.
Yeah.
So now we have to rephrase it. Change the verb.
So we could just cut ability to and just have engage.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But point well made on the grammatical topic.
Glad to help. And
then something that we at the County of Sonoma have have begun to do with regards to kind of those desired qualifications is to highlight those skill sets that come from folks who may speak different languages, who may have bicultural experiences, because it allows people to see themselves in the opportunity, and to understand that an agency, a hiring agency, is actually understanding life experience as a skill set that is useful to public service. And so I've dropped a couple of other suggestions into the chat here that I think are likely more in desired than essential. So it's this kind of engage with communities and community leaders who have experienced generational underservice and underrepresentation or institutional marginalization. Desired, also looking at bilingual language ability to facilitate connectivity to and work with language minorities in California. Sensitivity and understanding of specific barriers which may lead to lack of access and engagement. So some of these things that really, again, allow people to see themselves in this recruitment, and that broaden the scope and the reach of any recruitment here.
Commissioners, if you could just give us a moment to work on that. Stay tuned.
I mean, I think I'm not sure how I feel about it as a specific job requirement, but actually I think candidates ought to be asked, what can you tell us about how you have worked successfully in the seismic field in a multilingual, supporting multilingual communities. I mean, something to get it, so if someone's been an excellent manager to kind of make sure things proceeded in a way that connected with very diverse population, that would be a heck of a thing to make sure we surface, to understand.
I completely agree with that. I appreciate that comment. I think that some of these changes, what they do is also attract a diverse candidate pool that might not otherwise see their skill sets as being, valued in a recruitment. And so this kind of gets at, the ways in which we attract a diverse candidate population to these kinds of opportunities. And then I think I would hope that in the interview process, then we would ask all candidates about their ability to do this, regardless of whether or not they are bilingual, bicultural, come from communities that are immigrant or communities that have experienced marginalization. And so, I think there are kind of two stages of this effort, and the first stage that we have found useful is in this recruitment stage, to really kind of bring people's understanding and attention to the fact that we are looking for lived experience and valuing lived experience.
Yeah. I think that's good. I agree with that.
Folks, so I think we've added a few bullets here. So we're just, I'm just getting to reading them. I missed some of your comments because we're having a discussion here. I think we threw a third bullet in here, and I'll see. I'm reading it now.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes, please do.
I might suggest folding that first highlighted bullet into the third. And
Yes.
just including non-English speaking or something to that effect. That way it reads a little bit smoother.
Yeah.
So specifically racially, ethnically, non-English speaking, and socioeconomic, or however you want to characterize the bilingual.
Yeah. I think one of the sensitivities is we're trying to make sure that you still have some flexibility if a candidate is not bilingual, but you can put an emphasis and state it as a desirable qualification, but also that even if someone's not bilingual, there's still an expectation that this person be sensitive in this area and have the ability to communicate across, identify barriers, and successfully navigate kind of those connections.
Can I suggest that in the third yellow bullet, rather than say present to diverse audiences, I think it's communicate with, because present sounds like it's one-way communication. And I really think we're talking about creating a dialogue with a variety of stakeholders, including those who are of racially, ethnically, and et cetera, et cetera.
So should that, I sort of think that final and in that sentence should be or. Just we're not stacking these things up. They all, each one of them is an important independent item. Pardon me.
I think I would definitely agree with that. The second bullet strikes me as I'm not quite sure if I was interviewing someone what question I would ask that would generate the kind of information we're looking for and the experiences. So can we be a little more precise?
Or I wonder, just my first blush reaction is I wonder if that bullet that we all just kind of massaged can also address that in some way, kind of the message that we're trying to deliver in the bullet that starts with sensitivity.
Yeah, that socioeconomically probably is what that.
You know, I think that second bullet kind of relates to, you know, if you're the candidate, speaking professionally now, trying to ensure that all Californians are safe, which is a thrust of the Seismic Safety Commission. Are there aspects of our state's disaster response that you think to this point have not well served particular populations? And if so, who are those populations and in what ways has it failed them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there's excellent data coming out from many places that have experienced disaster that show the ways in which federal programs in particular are exclusive to people who are non-English speaking, who are undocumented, and prohibit them from accessing benefits. And that we see the impact on deepening inequity that is specifically around racial lines after disasters, because of the ways that these programs are structured, and because that we essentially we inherit a lot of these institutional challenges in the actual program design and program exclusion. And so, and then I think, you know, in particular, I'm not as well versed in terms of, you know, earthquake disasters, but certainly in Sonoma during fire disasters, communication with non-English speaking populations was a huge challenge, and doing the work to get out into language minority media sources and to have the staff capacity to be able to share information in real time with people who don't speak English had a huge and enormous, you know, impact on their feelings of safety and connectivity to the disaster response. So, you know, I think, you know, specifically in disaster work, I always go back to our amazing director of emergency management, who's you know, a white male leader who's like, you know, I hate when people say like, oh, it doesn't matter what language people speak. You know, I speak to everybody. He's like, nope, it absolutely matters, because I need to know what languages those are. And I need to know who speaks those languages, because it's my job to communicate with all of those people. And so, you know, I feel like there's multiple ways in which communities that are, you know, are disconnected from our mainstream ways of communicating experience significant amounts of disconnection from some of those efforts.
So how do we apply this bullet to what the work of the Seismic Safety Commission is, which is not disaster response? It is, because that's where lack of access to what and engagement about what.
Thank you, Commissioner Silva. I think you're saying about what I was about to share with the commission, that I think that those were very important points. And frankly, I was jotting down some notes, kind of given my work on the Office of Equity Space. This body does not determine eligibility and benefits, and it's not a disaster response organization, but trying to think about how do we get the spirit with which those comments are made folded into these to these bullets and keeping them high enough level that gives you some flexibility.
Yep. So, I mean, I completely understand the disaster response connection. I think that if the work of the Seismic Safety Commission is to really study and to drill down into those, whether it's the kinds of research and information that we need to be communicating, or even, you know, the ability for us to understand and to be able to study the impact of, you know, disaster response on our work, as it applies to communities that experience that marginalization, then I think, you know, I'd love for us to be creative about what does come out of this that is you know, relevant to our jurisdiction and to our authority and our responsibility.
So something that I might suggest here, given the high level nature of this document, is perhaps you speak to this as being a principle of the body, and that I think you were referencing kind of that this should be, maybe we craft something that talks about the importance of taking that principle into consideration in the various studies and the work of the Seismic Safety Commission. And that's not an elegant way of saying that, but is that something that the commission might be interested in?
I mean, I think once you put on the table the fact that this commission has very specific responsibilities by law, and couple it with this idea, you know, 85, 89, 76, duties and authorities of the commission. Contract for professional service research required that relate to seismic safety, encourage and support research related to seismic safety, recommend changing state agency guidelines to reduce damage or increase seismic safety when new developments promote earthquake hazard mitigation, develop findings and recommendations on lessons learned. I think there are so many aspects of the charge by law to this commission and consequent to this officer who will jump in to this very important and big role. They apply that kind of lens to these statutory duties. I just think it opens up new horizons on the sort of work that might be done. So I definitely feel like this sort of perspective coupled with the underlying law, you know, this is the sort of thing that, as I say, we will find somebody who, when they figure out these are the sorts of values we've got, and this is the law, they will start imagining what they might do with their life in this role. And so much of it, all of our careers comes down to that sort of deployment of self. What am I going to work on? How am I going to bend the curve? And I think, I just think when we connect it to this, some of these ideas and put them front and center as underlying values, I do think it'll feed into excellent candidates and big ideas.
So what if we said that may lead to lack of access or engagement on the mission and work of the commission?
Well, and the safety of Californians, let's just throw that in there because that is the bottom line. I think that's good. But I mean, the bottom line is it's the safety of Californians. That's the special raison d'etre of the commission.
I just always get concerned when it gets as broad as the safety of Californians, that the scope and mission.
But that's why it's this unique multidisciplinary body. It is the place where all these threads get drawn together and looked at through a broad lens. That is the commission. So it's like it's not a silo. And it's by law, it works with all agencies on these issues. And it brings forward recommendations that can touch the whole state. That's part of its charge. You know, recommend the addition, deletion, or changing of state agency guidelines or standards to reduce damage from earthquakes or increase seismic safety when new developments would promote earthquake hazard mitigation. This has a government-wide charge to be looking at seismic safety issues. It is a big responsibility by law. That's 8589.76D.
So I think what this does by keeping it to the mission and work of the commission, it basically then has to refer back to those points of the regulations that you're referencing.
Right, state law, yes.
We agree with that statement, Commissioner Silva.
So in the interest of time, because we're now beyond the 10 a.m., are there any other changes that people would recommend to the duty statement? And as many of you will note, I am now back in my office and on camera and not so constrained by not being able to see all of you. So we have the duty statement with some amendments that are in yellow. Lisa, what else do you need to cover here before we actually try to bring this to closure?
Commissioner Silva, the only thing that we owed you folks is going back to the first document, which was the hiring process. So Chief Counsel Powell here, in response to Commissioner Cooley's comment, the goal here was to insert as the statutory
references.
Yes, and so
I'm gonna send it right back to Sarah here momentarily.
Okay.
so staff are trying to do that in real time.
And you'll see as Sarah pulls it up, just to give everyone a heads up, and Assemblymember Cooley, I cut and pasted a significant portion of 8589.7576 and I referenced the 77 in that first section of the recruitment document as part of a background. So it's an introduction, background, and purpose, if that satisfies the commission. Let's take a look. And it's many of the things that you had just read out for the duty statement. So.
I see you added the language. Oh, yeah. I see.
And let me say how grateful to these two that I am that they're doing this, because if I was doing this for all of you, this would be a mess.
We can pull things out. I literally, you'll see it's sort of block edition. But.
Here we go. So the intent was so that's lifted straight out of statute?
It is, with a couple of tweaks. So what I did was I inserted it to the middle of that first section, and then it concludes with the commission can work with OES to do it. But this sort of frames the recruitment, what the executive director is expected to do, and the responsibilities of the commission, which the ED will be managing. And then towards the bottom of the screen, Assemblymember Cooley, you'll see all of those provisions that you had read from the subdivisions under 76 that talk about outreach and best practices and so forth.
No, I think this, I mean, thank you. I definitely actually agree with Lisa. You need a more formal process. And while I have my own take on the role, I do think this just kind of centers people and starts informing candidates to kind of understand how does the law describe it. And then the other work we've done to start what sort of underlying values are seen as important, people start understanding how they connect their life experience, things they've done to the full breadth of this office, which is basically how you get outstanding candidates who bring some energy. So, I often find, Alex, when I draft things, your first name is Alex? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I'm a lawyer, so for 40 years, my standard refrain when I draft something, to which you were very much entitled this morning, is Alex, I tell people, well, I like the way I'm doing it wrong, better than the way you're doing it, not at all. So I'm not doing the drafting here. I think you've done a fine job. And so I thank you for that.
So I think with this edit, we're very comfortable with this. And kind of in plain people language, I think that this edition kind of simply put, I think reinforces that the position is a big deal, right? This isn't just any position. I really appreciate the comments and the contributions that you folks have added. I think it helps to elevate and put a little more front and center the important work to serve all Californians. And I think that this is a good addition to really remind folks that unlike most positions in state government, this one is truly anchored in statute, and particularly given the bill is fairly recent, right? AB 100 was adopted, just several years ago. So it's a fairly contemporary expression of the legislature's intent.
Yeah. Well said.
I'm going to circle back and say, are there any other proposed changes to the duty statement or the process statement? Any other proposed changes to the duty statement itself, the multi-page document with all of the bullets? Before we go for a vote on this, I'm going to see if any members of the public, not of the commission, but of the public, wish to comment on this recruitment process and duty statement. And Tanya, I'll hope you can help me navigate through.
Yeah, to take the roll.
No, actually, I want to see if there are any members of the public who wish to comment on the recruitment process document or the duty statement document.
I don't see any.
I don't see any raised hands, but I'm not as familiar working in teams as I am with the other competing product in the market. So,
Yeah, I don't see any.
All right, then I'm going to bring it back to the commission for a motion to approve both the process or the recruitment process and the duty statement documents with the amendments. Assemblymember Cooley, can I ask you to make?
Sure, I was waiting for someone else. I'm happy to make that motion. Thank you for your work in bringing this forward, Cindy. Even though we've talked about it, it's something rather than nothing, and it's good. Thank you. I move it.
I'll second it. Commissioner
Who is
Garnes.
that?
Commissioner Garnes.
Commissioner Garnes, thank you very much. So we have a motion by Assemblymember Cooley and a second by Commissioner Garnes to approve the recruitment process and duty statement documents with the proposed amendments. Tanya, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes. Commissioner Cindy Silva,
Aye.
Commissioner Ken Cooley,
Aye.
Representative Diane Gould for Commissioner Ida Claire,
Sorry, I was muted. Aye.
Commissioner Deborah Garnes,
Aye.
Commissioner Allegra de la Cruz. I believe she had to drop off for another meeting. Let's see, Representative Lori Nazarian for Commissioner Marco Ducci.
Aye.
Commissioner June Kim Lopez.
Aye.
And then I believe Commissioner Andy Tran, he had to leave the call as well. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's the roll is completed.
Thank you very much, everyone. At this point, the commission will be adjourning this portion of the meeting and reconvening in closed session, and then we will come back subsequently.
So I'm going to assign everybody to the closed and open session. So if you give me a second so I can do that.
We are going into closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 11126A1.
Commissioner Silva, I think we're in contact with staff there in terms of whether we've got sufficient quorum.
So this is Alex Powell. Understanding that some folks have left the meeting, does somebody know how many commissioners appeared at the beginning of the meeting to establish the quorum? And then
Yes.
It was 8, was it
Yeah.
not? Yeah.
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We had 9 commissioners that started the quorum for the meeting. And we are now at 6.
Yeah, so we're good. So 9 established the quorum, and then 6 represents a majority of the votes in favor of passing it. So we are good.
Thank you. So now we get to go to closed session?
Yes, hold on. I'm finishing up putting everybody in their room assignments. So apologies. Okay. I just want to double check. I make sure I have everybody needs to.
There was a moment there where I thought I was stuck in alone in a rowboat. All right, we are now reconvening in open session to report that during the closed session, the commission heard the recommendation on the acting executive director and then affirmed by a unanimous vote to accept that recommendation. And we will be able to announce that publicly once the candidate has accepted the offer. At this point, if there are no other questions, the next item, the final item on the agenda is public comment. If there is any member of the public who has additional comment to us, if you could please either raise the hand symbol or advise us by just opening your microphone and saying, yes, I would.
I don't see any hands that I can see it.
Seeing no members of the public who wish to make comments at this time, I am now going to close the meeting and wish everyone a happy holidays.
Commissioner Silva,
Yes.
I'm sorry to kind of come in right before close. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that this is the executive director, Dick McCarthy's last commission meeting. So I'll be very brief, but I just wanted to thank him. Dick, I feel like if you and I had met very earlier on in our careers, I can't imagine what kind of mischief we would have been able to create. I did want to share with you folks that the director was sorry that he could not be here, but he's offering up a certificate of commendation. And I'd like to share a letter that's also attached to this. Dear Dick, congratulations on your retirement after 42 years of public service. With 26 years as executive director of the Alfred E. Ahlquist Seismic Safety Commission. It has been a pleasure to work with you, especially during the last years you led the seamless transition of the commission with Cal OES. You have been a true leader in geology and seismic safety, navigating the commission through reports, studies, and projects that have made an indelible mark on the safety of homes and commercial buildings for all Californians. You also served as a geologist for the Getty Oil and Fugro Incorporated, where you provided expertise in site identification for nuclear power plants in California, Arizona, and Puerto Rico. Your efforts have truly made a difference. Best wishes for the future, and I hope your retirement is rewarding and you enjoy it to the fullest. So thank you very much, Dick. I know I tease you a lot about the length of your service, but I've always felt like we're all kindred spirits, that you truly have the heart of a public servant. And I think the people of California really owe you a debt of gratitude. So with deepest appreciation, that's all that the Cal OES team has to offer. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Lisa and everybody. And as I said last time, my last meeting, it's been a great honor for me to serve the people of California. I don't regret it a bit. It's been a lifetime opportunity for me. The exposure this job gave me, not only to California, but worldwide, as Assemblyman Cooley has talked about. I mean, the commission is so well respected around the world for different entities. And I see it's even going to do better things now. And I appreciate the effort that the management has gone through to hire a replacement. And I'll always be available if you need any questions from me or any help from me. I'm certainly be around. So thank you, Lisa, and the team very much for the honor to serve.
Yeah. Well, if I can jump in, Dick, it's been great working with you across your career. Of course, 26 years, buddy. And in the other setting, we'd say you were like in a serious rut. But of course, since this is earthquake, we know you're down in a trench looking for ancient faulting. You're not 26 years in a rut. But I certainly want to thank you all the vicissitudes of stepping in the wake of Northridge and the challenges the state faced and the development. I know of your report around the nation on this topic, and so many conversations on earthquake nationally, the boot heel in Missouri, and all manner of other topics. I just thank you for your work with the Western states on seismic. And it's a sort of thing you just sort of have to grind away, because it is in everyone's consciousness, and it fades for a time when earthquakes get more remote. But it's a long disciplined service you've given us all. So I thank you, Dick.
Thank you, Ken, very much. I appreciate it.
Other comments from members of the commission? I'm going to close this.
Mrs. Chair, I've said it before in open meeting. Thank you again very much, Dick, and I hope we can stay in touch. We'd love to host you in Orange County.
For sure. Thank you, Commissioner, very much.
Then I am going to bring this to conclusion. Wish you safe travels, Dick, and hopefully that is literally travels when things get normal again.
True.
And wishing all of you happy holidays, and thank you for taking the time today to be here for this meeting. I know we're squeezing this in just before the holidays, and that can often be difficult. Thank you, Cal OES, for all of your work on this, and